Hello and welcome to the Mobalytics patch 11.21 High Elo tier list. Don't have too many individual changes this patch, some big changes to the systems, a lot of items and runes adjusted here, so let's get stuck straight in. So in the top lane, in the god tier we have Camille, Aurelia, Riven and Graves, and the S tier we have Fiora. Tops are a big change in terms of rune and item nerfs, specifically Conqueror and Goredrinker. These two were super dominant in the current meta, and in the case of Goredrinker, it's pretty substantial with the free percentage AD passive being removed, resulting in a lot less power overall. For some champions this is resulting in them switching to other mythics if they're able to, but for a lot it's simply a flat power reduction. Conqueror got a more minor but still substantial nerf, and it's meant any champion who can avoid using both, like Camille with Divine Sundra and Grasp, have been left in a solid spot while others are feeling a bit of the pain. We saw Teemo get a massive buff on the patch, with his blind duration and cooldown both being buffed. At level 9 you can now blind a target for 3 seconds on a 7-second cooldown before ability haste. It's really frustrating to deal with as an auto attack based champion and leaves limited counterplay. Sion also got a solid buff to his shield in terms of its max HP scaling. It's definitely helped, but more so was the nerfs to Conqueror and Goredrinker. Quinn got her attack speed on her W nerfed, it's what she maxes first and definitely tones down her ability to harass her lane opponents and shred through them. She'll still find favour in her good matchups, but she may struggle a bit more when her opponent can trade back or dash into range of her. So onto our highlight picks. First up is Graves, and he gets early lane control against almost every champ in the game. As a result, he can just perma shove and pressure you under the tower. It basically forces you to all in him every other wave, or you just slowly bleed to death. He scales insanely well and has a variety of builds. Against bruisers and diving champs, he can go for a full lifesteal build like the one we've highlighted, but against longer range champions that he can't get in range to auto, he can go full lethality and blow them up with Q and ult. Graves even received a minor nerf from this patch to the armor he's granted by his grid, but he just does not care. Action has been a dominant force in the mid lane, but is also causing issues top. His big strength is his mobility, and the fact that he can dodge ganks so effectively with his E. This means there's far less pressure to take TP, and with Ignite he becomes one of the strongest lane bullies. Essentially he serves a similar purpose to Quinn, but is arguably better right now, and even with his E damage being decreased on this patch, he's still a force to be reckoned with. Shen is a really good lane counter to a lot of the meta tops like Camille and Aurelia. His global ultimate is an OP tool in solo queue and can not only turn players on the other side of the map, but syncs very well with a lot of assassins who want to dive onto the opponent's backline. With Conqueror and Goredrinker nerfed, he fares even better, and it definitely diminishes the power of a lot of the lane opponents he would typically run into. Onto the jungle, we don't have any champs in the god tier, and in the S tier we have Fiddlesticks, Kha'Zix and Kindred. Jungle was similarly widely affected by the nerfs to Goredrinker and Conqueror. A lot of junglers like Xin Zhao, Lee Sin and Jarvan were reliant on both of these for the power they offered in skirmishes on a one-item spike. This has allowed other junglers to move up and take their place, and those who were performing well without being reliant on these two as a combo are doing excellent. Graves also got a minor nerf to the armor and his grip passive, but it hasn't affected him too heavily. Viego is arguably the strongest skirmishing champion in the game. If you get one kill, reset in a fight, it will pretty much guarantee the fight is won. His clear is decently fast as well, and he works solidly with any setup champions. With a couple of buffs he got in this patch, he's in a better spot, and a big thing with Goredrinker nerf is he's found favour as one of the skirmish focused junglers who isn't affected by this, since he's able to build Divine Sundra or even crit mythics. Talon has a clear that holds up pretty well with most junglers, but the big strength is his insane mobility, so he can go for powerful ganks over walls and other terrains similar to Rek'Sai to apply heavy early pressure. Goredrinker, or the Bruiser build, did get nerfed, but is still best as it allows him to stay in fights longer and buy time while still doing enough damage to almost one-shot squishy targets. In teamfights, looking for flanks or weird angles to approach is ideal, and utilizing your E lets you get onto the enemy backline to cause havoc. Fiddle has a super fast and healthy clear, particularly if you're doing camps like Blue and Gromp at the same time with your W. Your skirmishing isn't the best, but ganks are very powerful with your ultimate and Predator. Essentially, a big factor in Fiddle's strength is catching the enemy team off guard, and if he's able to get ahead, it's so difficult to bring the game back, as face checking against him is devastating. In teamfights, your ult is incredibly powerful, and this is very effective when contesting neutral objectives, as a Crow Storm in a Dragon of Baron pit can wreak havoc. Onto the mid lane, in the god tier we have Kastin and Kiana, and in the S tier we have Ahri, Akshan, Anivia, Galio, Katarina LeBlanc, Twisted Fate and Zillion. It's all limited changes. The most major was Lux being pretty heavily buffed with a shorter ult cooldown early and extra damage on the E, alongside some quality of life changes. Lux still suffers from being very reliant on a Q for self peel, but she can cause massive issues with the enemy team when ahead with her ability to one combo opponents. Twisted Fate has a lot of power in the right hands. His point and click CC is really hard to deal with in skirmishes, and this is extenuated by his core items. With Everfrost you can stun card into a guaranteed route, and with Rapid Fire Cannon you can increase the range by which you can stun a target, posing even greater threat. TF's ultimate is problematic for the enemy team in solo queue. Anytime you find priority you can look to threaten the side lanes, and this can involve going for a dive, punishing overextended opponents, or sometimes just posing enough threat that they have to back off and play defensive. LeBlanc is super powerful at higher elo. pressure is pretty consistent, as not only can she threaten solo kills, but being able to W in and land a chain means it's very easy to set up ganks, while your mobility makes it hard to be answered. LeBlanc has some trickier matchups, but if you're able to find a lead, then she'll be comfortable in a huge range of situations. Even in the late game, her huge amount of burst damage keeps her as a potent threat, and if you can find isolated targets, it's easy pickings. Katarina is just frustrating to play against. Solo kills are fairly easy to find in the early levels, but they're not even necessary. All you need is a single roam window bot where you can find a double kill, and now you're in a position to take over the game. Unless the enemy team has a point and click hard CC, you can often run rampant in a fight, and when fed you'll obliterate targets before they can even react. Definitely a high skill cap, but when she gets rolling she'll take over games so easily. Onto AD carry, we don't have any champions in the god tier, and in the S tier we have Jhin, Jinx, Misfortune, Vayne and Ziggs. Misfortune saw a nerf to her mana pool and W costs, but it's not enough to really bring her down. She may go quicker, but she's still a dominant force. Ravenous Hunter was also nerfed again. At this point it's just almost always going to be better to take Legend Bloodline where possible and skip over Domination. The exception is if you go on Halo Blades, where it will still likely be the best choice out of the Hunter options. A new build is coming for Xayah, and it's off the back of her Q change this patch. Essentially they lowered her Q cooldown when it's maxed, so people have been maxing it first and rushing Essence Reaver. The ability haste is solid, and it means you can spam it without going play pattern becomes Q auto E or just QE if they're longer range, and you can chunk out distant targets. It's really frustrating to play against, and in the current melee meta, her ultimate and E are powerful tools. Xayah works really well with engaged supports, as you can set them up, or they can set her up to layer CC and pile on a ton of damage. Jinx got a range of buffs on the current patch. Her ultimate cooldown is a fair bit lower, but she also got more attack speed on her passive resets. Jinx was already capable of taking over games in later stages, but this has really just been bolstered. In the laning phase, your E can stop opponents in their tracks, and if you're able to lay it with your support CC, it can be crippling. A big thing to remember is that the Flame Chompers have 9-5 range with this buff, so often you can throw them behind your opponents and force them to path around them, which can sometimes be impossible. And last but not least, onto support. In the God tier we have Bard and Nami, in the S tier we have Sona, Soraka and Thresh. Support saw Guardian nerfed, which was pretty substantial as it was running a range of defensive supports and even enchanters into tricky engage lanes. On top of that, we saw the health stat rune buffed to the point where it can be decent to take in combination with armor from the middle line. Genius Hunter got a pretty significant buff, and there's a lot of use cases where this is powerful. This impacts support pretty heavily as a lot of champions have a bunch of items with actives, but it's also important to remember that even non-activatable items with cooldowns will benefit from this. Yuumi has been one of the defining picks at World, which has increased her popularity massively in solo queue. She synergizes very well with MF, Lucian and Ezreal, who are 3 frequently picked AD carries in the current meta. On top of that, the best champions for it to sit on are Assassins and Bruisers, and both are in a solid spot right now in mid, jungle and top lane. Having a strong option to switch to in the mid to late is really important when picking Yuumi, but honestly at the moment she has the highest ban rate in the game, so good luck at even getting your pulls on her. A small buff to Lux's E might not seem like much, but her ult cooldown was also reduced significantly to give her a lot more power in trades and all-ins. The current bot lane meta heavily emphasizes playing for wave control, and this is an area she excels in, often being able to poke at her opponents while quickly shoving the lane. Lux has a good amount of flexibility. She can be played as a mage for the damage she offers, or as a more defensive pick relying on her W shield and strong defensive active items. It can often depend on the game and how much threat there is to her in a backline. Maokai has been seen as win rate steadily increased over the last few patches. While he is a beneficiary of the mandate buffs, that isn't a build which has been seeing the most success. Instead, Dead Man's Plate is the item which stands out on top, as it allows you to get in range for your point and click W to lock a target down. Maokai almost perfectly slots into what is needed from the support role right now. He provides a tanky frontline, rush control and lane for wave priority, and a lot of lockdown and space denial for teamfights around Drake. And that's it for this patch. Hopefully this has been helpful in getting you up to speed on the meta. If you're interested in seeing the full low elo and high elo list in one place, including C&D tiers, then head on over to mobalytics.gg where you can get even more info including counters, builds, tips, combos and more. Everything's just been revamped, so be sure to check it out. See you next time, and thanks for watching.